Welcome to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers with Linda Prio. Will it be possible to remain in my home as I age? Do I feel safe in my home? How do I figure out how much support I will need when my health needs start to change? What if I decide to move into a community instead? Which community will meet my needs now and in the future? Who will play a role in helping me with decision making? Do you ask yourself these same questions? Aging in Place Strategies and Answers can help you gain practical knowledge that will help you create your own Aging in Place roadmap. If you are already a care partner, a power of attorney, or in crisis mode with your Aging in Place strategy, you will learn what you need to know that you don't know. For over 20 years, I have been marketing Aging in Place services to clients and educating families and healthcare professionals in how to put aging in place strategies into place. When you utilize aging in place, you are allowed to choose where you want to live and make those decisions so that you can retain your quality of life. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers. And I am hoping that you caught my latest podcast with Michelle Perry, who is a financial planner with Triad Financial Group. During that podcast, we discussed how to work through the business side of death. And what we meant by that when we talked about it was there will be times, of course, that you will lose someone who is precious to you, close to you, and you will be going through a grieving process, which is more emotional than business. But there is also a business side that comes with the passing of someone who is close to you. And this is what we are trying to get prepared for. The, in quotes, air quotes, the business side of death. What happens after someone passes and what you need to be prepared for. Well, this is going to lead me to my first question for you today. And the question is, what documents have you put in place that will transfer your assets and your property to another person when you pass who will have decision-making capacity? So obviously you're not going to transfer them to someone who cannot make decisions, right? That they have their mental faculties, but also that you are now, when you pass from this life, you are going to be giving that person decision-making capacity to handle your final affairs. And that is the business side of grief that Michelle and I were talking about. The next question I'm going to ask you is, do you have documents in place naming a power of attorney for healthcare? You know, many times we think of assets and property, but we don't always think about our healthcare decision making. If you have been to a doctor visit recently, or even to a hospital for a procedure, one of the routine questions you might get asked is, have you prepared and do you have a set of healthcare directives? And these directives are what you want to have put in place when you're unable to speak for yourself, either because of physical or mental incapacity. So that could be health-wise because of dementia or a health condition. So I want you to think about what I just asked, and if you have these healthcare directives put together and what you have told the hospital or the doctor's office. Because when my husband and I were at the hospital recently for a procedure, they asked us for those documents. We assured them that we had them in place. And so they filled out the box. But it got me thinking about this because, as you know, I work in healthcare. And so we don't always get the chance to prepare. You know, life has ups and downs, and we never know what's going to happen from one minute to the next. And so my question and thought process in this direction was, is the hospital the best time to prepare for healthcare directives? Certainly it's the time to start thinking about it, but is it the best time to fill out that paperwork? And then when you go on hospice, if that would be a requirement or a suggestion, then that you would be asked that similar question. Do you have healthcare directives? Who is named as your healthcare power of attorney? And is that hospital or medical experience really the best place for these conversations to take place? So my job in this podcast is always to keep your brain moving and educating you on things that could happen, might happen, and have happened to people that I have seen in this time of life. So being prepared, if we can ahead of time, is always the best policy. So it would be my sincere hope that if you're listening to this podcast by yourself, that you send a copy of my podcast with Michelle Perry of Triad Financial Group to your parents or to your partners so that you can have a conversation about this topic. And that's the other part of what Michelle and I talked about during our time together. And that is, these kinds of conversations need to take place, and they do not have to be emotional. They don't have to be cause a problem. They can just come up in normal conversation, but having the conversation is better than not having it, because in this way you have prepared appropriately. So, friends, the time to prepare is now, and preferably not in crisis mode. But again, as I've said before, I do want to assure you that professionals understand that many times we don't have things in order, and we know how to help people in crisis. It might cost more in time, and it might be more difficult because this is a time of great change or grief, but it certainly is possible. But if you have the time to prepare, why not? Well, 10 years ago, my husband and I created trust documents that would go into effect should the remaining spouse pass. And it was time for a review of our documents because a lot had changed in 10 years. Our children were married and they had spouses now. And then we had the wonderful addition of our precious grandchildren. And yes, we're zany, crazy, obsessed grandparents. But yeah, if you want to see pictures, just reach out to me. Ha. But because so much had changed in that time, it was really important that we get back to the attorney and understand what needed to be put into place. So we made an appointment and started talking about how we had allocated dollars to be dispersed after we had passed, and realized that there was some language that needed to be changed. Of course, I had started my podcast during that 10 years. There were some new healthcare directive. There is new healthcare directive language in place because we had decided how we wanted our bodies disposed of or dealt with after death. We were able to add that into our documents. But then this was the new thing. And fortunately, I have the benefit of going to networking meetings and listening to other professionals present information. And I realized that digital content and our social footprints are huge. And who is going to be in charge of that? And what do we need to do so that we or our children or whoever is in charge can do their job as the administrator of our final documents? So it was a lot to think through and it was a lot to get through, but attorneys are really good at what they do and they keep it focused, offer their suggestions, let you know what the language says, and then you're able to put that into your documents. You know, early on when I started my podcast, I did a whole podcast on why people delay planning. And there's just a few reasons that I really see is, first of all, not really knowing what to do. And so therefore you just delay or don't do it. Difficult family relationships is another reason why people don't prepare, because either they don't have many family connections, or maybe their family connections are challenging. But this is why we consult professionals, because they know how to advise you. But there are other people that think, you know what, I just don't have that much. I don't have a lot of assets. I don't have a lot of property. This is going to be super simple, but I don't know about you, but nothing with the law is super simple. So I heard one attorney presenting a couple of weeks ago, and she said, if you don't think you have much in assets or property, I want you to think again. She said, even 18-year-olds have a bank account and a car. That's assets and property, my friend. And if you have 18-year-olds and are listening today, you need to make sure that they have some documents in place too, or accessing their bank account, or disposing of a car, or giving it to someone else is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Of course, acknowledging that this is more important as you age, because in your life and time, you have gained assets, you have secured property. And not planning is going to be costly in money, it's going to be costly in time, and it's going to be costly in relationships. Because when someone passes, there is going to be grief, and grief usually is displayed in anger, arguments, broken relationships, and misunderstandings. So I always suggest that you choose a lawyer that specializes in estate planning and wealth transfers. Also, be honest about family relationships and family extensions so that the lawyer knows how to give appropriate advice. If you're scratching your head about what I mean about family extensions, you and I both know that there are blended families, there are foster families, there are partners, there are marriages, there are business relationships, there are broken relationships. And so it's so important that you're really honest with your professional so that you can get appropriate advice. I'm going to pause now so that we can have a message from one of our sponsors.
The Neptune Society is the oldest and largest cremation service in the United States. For over 50 years, the Neptune Society has been proud to provide signature service to the families they've served. With a pre-arranged funeral plan, you can declare what you want done at the time of your passing, pay for it in advance, and not leave your survivors with the cost of your final arrangements. Call 314-266-2898. That's 314-266-2898.
Thank you, Neptune Society, for sponsoring this podcast. If you heard my last podcast, you heard Michelle tell a story about a woman whose partner had called and had interviewed Michelle. They had asked a lot of questions about the kind of business she did, probably asked her about what they would do if, when, and how she could probably help his partner. And then Michelle didn't hear from that gentleman for quite a long time. The story goes that he handed the business card to his partner and said, if you ever need any help, call Michelle. The partner, in the period of a year since Michelle had heard from this person, had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and had already passed. But the good news here is that his partner had retained the business card and had very clearly heard and remembered the instruction. If something happens and you need help, call Michelle. Well, if you have documents prepared, I have something you and I both have to get going on. Michelle's pro tip was to make sure that your assigned decision makers have a current copy of your documents. Digital versions are now available. People don't have to carry around a lot of paper with them like we had to in the past. Digital versions can be saved on your phone, they can be saved on your laptop, or anywhere you save documents like this. But normally in 2025, most people have their phones available. And so Michelle mentioned that it is fine to store those documents on your phone so that when or if you might be called to advocate for someone, then you would be ready and you would have the documents immediately accessible. Plus, if you needed to send them digitally, to be able to even start a conversation with a lawyer, a hospital, maybe a hospice company, maybe a bank, because the person that you're representing has become incapable of advocating for themselves or making a decision, rather than having to say, oh, yes, I have those documents, but I'm not really sure where they are. Or, yes, the documents are ready, but I think they're in my parents' house, which is not in the same state as I'm in. And so I think you begin to see and to understand how much easier it will be when you can start the process of advocating for the person that you're representing quickly, rather than being tied up due to location or not having the actual paperwork at your fingertips. I mentioned early in the podcast, and so did Michelle, about starting a conversation with your decision makers, letting them know where the documents are and what they actually say. And these conversations, when started ahead of time, make it super simple for your representative to follow your instructions and carry out their duties. In addition to having a conversation, it is important to create a safe place for the keys to your property, passwords to bank accounts, to social media, to utilities, perhaps even your phone, your iPad, laptop, and any business succession plan that applies. One other point I want to make before I start talking about something else is that I visualize that it would be very helpful for any adult children or power of attorney, whether it's financial or medical, to have expert advice to guide them through this process. So as we concluded our visit with our attorney, they told us that if and when these documents would be in action due to our passing, so they're in place now. The person we've assigned to administer the estate is now doing their job, that the attorney's office would be there to guide them and direct them or answer questions as needed. And I felt in my spirit a sigh of relief, because we know that we have assigned this job to someone who will have children of their own, will have a job, will be possibly even dealing with another set of parents who might be going through this at the same time. And the reason why I say that is because that's exactly what happened to my husband and myself. So, we have been there and done that. And so this is why this makes a lot of sense to us, and why I bring it to your attention, because not everybody has had that experience already in their lives. Just another word that I want to mention about the digital footprint. You and I both know that everything is being handled on the internet. There's an app for everything. There's a password. There's facial recognition. There's two-factor recognition. And it is so important to know where you're storing your digital content, and is it being stored in the cloud? Is it on your desktop? Is it in external storage? Or is it actually in a safe? So once you figure out what that is, whether it's in the cloud, on your desktop, or in external storage, or you have a special place for it, please let your designated folks know that. I also was very happy to see the additional wording that had been added to the healthcare directives, including organ donations and specific questions regarding end-of-life health decision-making, plus the disposition of the body if you have already pre-planned. Now, here is my warning. So please pay attention. This happens every single day. It happens all the time. And we know the expression many of us have grown up with. And the expression I want to share with you is that money is the root of all evil. And you think, not my family, not my kids, not the people I know. Well, all I'm going to say is, based on my experience, we all must do our best to make sure that seniors are not financially abused because of their property and their assets, and to be aware that scammers come in all different shapes and sizes, including well-intended family, extended family, and neighbors. And I cannot emphasize this enough. In some cases that I have been aware of, the senior was being financially abused and was unable to report it because of incapacity, or they didn't want to, another expression, ruffle the feathers or become a problem. Or what usually happens is there's also emotional abuse going on, where the person will say, well, if you tell anybody, I'm not going to take care of you. So you heard me give the warning to keep scammers at bay and to be aware what is going on with your senior. If part of your estate plan is creating a revocable living trust, you are also in charge of funding the trust. As I mentioned, I went to a networking event recently, and one of our speakers was an attorney, and she shared that although many people create a heritage trust, a living trust, they usually fail to fund the trust. And what that means is that you're taking your assets and you're taking your property and you're transferring it into the name of the trust. And so because this happens so frequently at our attorney's office, we had to sign a document that stated that we understood that that was our responsibility, but if we needed additional help from them in how to get that process started, that they would also give us that information. So again, funding a revocable living trust involves transferring assets from an individual name to the trust name. And this is a crucial step. This is the reason why you created the revocable trust, is to avoid probate, time, money, legal fees, and ensure your assets are being managed according to your wishes and not to the wishes of the court. So one more time, why fund the trust? To avoid probate. And probate means that the court is going to supervise the process of distributing assets after death. And again, this is costly in time and money for your beneficiaries. When you have transferred assets into the trust, then the trust will distribute monies or properties as you have outlined without court intervention. So if you have set up a revocable living trust, don't forget to fund it. And if you're thinking about setting up a revocable living trust, then ask your attorney about how to get started in funding your trust so that everything goes into the trust rather than into the court system called probate. I'm going to take another pause here to hear from our friends at Family Partners.
My husband and I had previous experience with his mother residing in a large-scale community, and I was determined to find a different solution for my mother. At Family Partners Home, my mother receives personal care from a team of professionals.
That's a quote from one of our Family Partners Home clients who receives care in one of our residential homes for those with dementia. For more information about Family Partners Home, our phone number is 314-686-4468 or online at familypartnershome.com.
Our next topic for this podcast is the EHR, the electronic health record, and the EMR, which is the electronic medical record. And many of you enjoy and use the online portals that health systems have put together to capture all your data, but they are different. So let's talk about each one. So the EMR, the electronic medical record, is a digital version of a patient's medical chart, and it's usually maintained within a single practice or facility, and it is used to manage the patient's data within that specific location, like a doctor's office or a hospital. And then there is the EHR, which is the electronic health record. And this is a more comprehensive collection of patient health information encompassing data from multiple healthcare providers and organizations. This electronic health record is designed to be shared across different healthcare settings, ensuring a complete picture of a patient's medical history, which I think is important for you to know and to understand, and for me to understand as well. But what I really want to talk to you about is the importance of being on the person you are representing, their documents at the doctor's office, as well as on the My Chart electronic health record that you are using with your health system. So there are a couple of ways that you can begin to be identified if it is necessary for you to start taking a more active interest in someone's health care. Number one, make sure that you are identified as another person to contact with test results or health information. And that a lot of times is handled very simply, either using an iPad in the doctor's office, or maybe they're actually still using paper. Now, if you want to be identified on an electronic record, then you will need to be invited or put on there by the person using that record. And generally, you can do that through the profile section of that medical record. And that is significant because we never know when medical incapacity could occur. Medical incapacity is when there are changes cognitively or physically, or both, and they reduce the person's ability to understand and to make healthcare decisions. It is also maybe important for you to be considered as that power of attorney when you're in the hospital or a healthcare setting, to have those documents, as I mentioned previously, on your phone or readily available, or can at least send them electronically to the person who is working with directly with your loved one. Now, several years ago, a family member of mine had a stroke. Wasn't really identified as somebody who could have a stroke, had not really presented with previous health conditions that would have led to a stroke, but immediately they lost their mental and physical capacity. And so then it was up to the power of attorney to make these decisions. Now, I was present because I was local. The power of attorney was actually out of town. So phone calls had to be made. I actually had to give the phone number and name of the person who was the power of attorney. So when this is a little bit more seamless, you can see that timeliness could be saved when this is done, as it should be ahead of time. At the end of every podcast, you know that I really have a heart for people who are in these positions of caring for folks and having to make these decisions, or to come alongside to make sure that everything is being taken care of and that everybody is on the same page. So make sure that you're having conversations that are just simple fact-finding conversations. They don't have to be argumentative. They don't have to be a big deal. They don't have to be emotional. It is the business side of grief. Also, make sure that if dementia or there's some form of cognitive decline, that you get in to see an attorney sooner rather than later. Legal capacity is different than medical capacity. And so I had another family member whose loved one had dementia. And the lawyer asked, do you recognize that this is your loved one? Do you, and they nodded their head, yes, they recognized that this was a family member. Do you trust this person to make legal and financial and health decisions on your behalf? And they nodded their head again. And so then the paperwork and the documents could be produced. So my friends, Planning is very helpful, and I hope that you got a lot out of this podcast today and reaffirmed what Michelle and I had discussed when we talked about where your documents are, where they're stored, how to have conversations, and how to handle the business side of grief. Join me again next time on Aging in Place, Strategies and Answers. Thank you for joining me today. Please remember that this podcast is intended as education and not advice. Don't forget to share this podcast with family, friends, or colleagues who want to learn how to age in place, but also share this with those who find themselves in crisis mode. Please go to my website, seniorsupportstrategies.com, for more information. When you subscribe to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers, you gain access to premium content and professional tips on creating your own Aging in Place roadmap. As always, I value the time you spend with me.